In the quiet pre-dawn of a small-town park, the world feels different. The usual hustle and noise are muted, replaced by the chirping of early birds and the soft crunch of gravel underfoot as the first walkers arrive. Officer Tom Evans, a seasoned cop with a reputation for being strict, some would say harsh, on certain communities, begins his routine patrol. He's scanning the park, looking for anything unusual, as though even at this peaceful hour, trouble might lurk. At the same time, Jaden Jail Reed, a local biker known for his strong stance on social issues and for leading a group of predominantly Black and Latino riders, cuts through the park on his motorcycle. The morning air is crisp, and he savors the feeling of freedom, riding to clear his head. To some, Jaden's gang-like appearance might suggest trouble, but those who know him understand his commitment to bettering his community through charity rides and mentorship programs. Evans, spotting Jaden in the park, bristles immediately. To him, Jaden's presence at this early hour signals something suspicious. Without a second thought, Evans approaches, determined to question Jaden about why he's here. The encounter is about to escalate. Officer Evans steps out of his patrol car, his gaze fixed on Jaden, already convinced that the young man has no legitimate reason to be in the park this early. With a hand resting near his belt, he strides toward Jaden, whose peaceful ride is abruptly interrupted by the officer's firm, unfriendly voice. "Hey, you there," Evans calls out, his tone sharp. "Mind explaining what you're doing here at this hour?" Jaden pulls his motorcycle to a stop and removes his helmet, meeting Evans' eyes without flinching. He's used to encounters like these, but it never gets easier. "Just out for a ride, officer. Nothing more," Jaden replies calmly, keeping his tone respectful. Evans narrows his eyes, clearly unsatisfied with the answer. "In a park? At dawn? Seems suspicious to me. You part of some gang?" he questions, the accusation barely veiled. Jaden takes a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "I'm part of a community group. We ride, we do charity work, and we mentor. We're not a gang," he says, emphasizing the distinction. But Evans isn't listening. His mind is already made up, and each word from Jaden only seems to heighten his suspicion. As Evans continues his pointed questions, a few early joggers slow down, noticing the interaction. They've seen Evans at work before, and some quietly begin recording, sensing that things could escalate. Jaden, aware of the growing attention and not wanting trouble, stays composed, trying to de-escalate. But Evans' demeanor is increasingly hostile, and his body language shows an underlying aggression that Jaden recognizes all too well. As the morning light grows, so does the crowd. A few bystanders pause their routines, watching closely, and their phones capture the tension in the air. Officer Evans, aware of the attention but unwilling to back down, continues his barrage of questions, his tone growing sharper with each one. "You expect me to believe that?" Evans sneers, inching closer. "A guy like you, just here for a peaceful ride? Give me a break. Where are your gang buddies?" Jaden clenches his jaw, suppressing his frustration. He knows his rights, but he also knows how situations like this can spiral. "I've already told you," he says, his voice steady but firm. "I'm here on my own, just passing through." Evans scoffs, visibly irritated by Jaden's calm response. "I don't buy it," he snaps, reaching out to grab Jaden's arm. The crowd murmurs in surprise, a mix of tension and apprehension spreading among the onlookers. The sudden, unwarranted physical contact sets Jaden on edge. He pulls his arm back instinctively, his patience wearing thin. "Hey, I don't want any trouble," he says, taking a step back, his hands open and defensive. But Evans is past listening, his temper flaring as he mistakes Jaden's defensive move for resistance. "Are you resisting arrest?" he barks, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. The crowd's murmurs grow louder, and a few people shout out in protest, warning Evans to back off. Jaden raises his hands, making a point to keep them visible, his expression a mix of frustration and caution. "I'm not resisting anything, officer," he says, trying to keep his voice calm. "But you're out of line." Evans, unfazed, grips his radio, ready to call for backup. The tension thickens, and it's clear that he won't let go without exerting his authority. At this point, the crowd senses the unfairness of the encounter and some begin to voice their disapproval. Evans ignores them, his focus solely on Jaden. The officer's pride and prejudice are pushing him to assert control, even if it means force. As Evans reaches for his cuffs, Jaden steps back, his instinct for self-preservation kicking in. But the officer is relentless, closing the distance in an instant. He grabs Jaden by the shoulder, yanking him backward with a force that sends both men stumbling. Jaden, unwilling to let himself be manhandled without cause, pulls away, trying to break free. The struggle between them intensifies in a matter of seconds, and before they know it, they're on the ground, locked in a physical confrontation. Evans, with his police training and years of experience, moves to pin Jaden, but Jaden's own strength and agility surprise him. Jaden manages to twist his body, throwing the officer off balance, and they roll across the grass, grappling for control. The onlookers gasp, phones capturing every second, as Evans tries to regain the upper hand, his face red with a mix of exertion and anger. "Stay down," Evans shouts, but his words carry a hint of desperation. He's not used to someone pushing back, especially someone he assumed would be easily subdued. Jaden, breathing heavily, holds his ground, using defensive moves rather than offensive ones, determined not to be branded as the aggressor. His training from community self-defense classes comes in handy, allowing him to deflect Evans' aggressive advances without throwing a punch. But Evans, blinded by his own frustration, sees this as further defiance. The struggle continues, both men wrestling across the park grounds as onlookers shout for Evans to stop. "This is out of line," someone yells. Another bystander shouts, "He hasn't done anything wrong." The voices of the crowd become louder, their support for Jaden growing with every second of the altercation. As the officer tries once again to pin Jaden, he finds himself momentarily on his back. Jaden, knowing he could press his advantage, instead pauses, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I'm not resisting, officer," he says firmly, his voice loud enough for the crowd to hear. "You need to back off." This momentary hesitation on Jaden's part gives Evans just enough time to scramble back to his feet, but he's shaken, both by the unexpected strength of his opponent and by the realization that he's losing control of the situation. The people watching are no longer silent witnesses. They're calling him out, challenging his authority in real time. Breathing heavily, Evans stands, but the look in his eyes is one of humiliation and rage. He's no longer just wrestling Jaden. He's wrestling with the crumbling image of his own authority. As Evans stands, catching his breath and looking around, he's confronted by a sea of disapproving faces. The onlookers, a diverse mix of early joggers, dog walkers, and other community members, aren't just passive witnesses anymore. Their voices echo in the quiet morning air, a collective call for accountability that rattles him. He glances down at Jaden, who is still on the ground, his expression a mixture of frustration and dignity. One woman steps forward, her voice steady and clear. "Enough, officer. This is not how you're supposed to protect and serve." Others nod, murmuring in agreement, emboldened by her words. Evans feels the weight of their judgment pressing down on him, his authority shrinking with every second that passes. Slowly, he turns his gaze to Jaden. The man hasn't fought back aggressively, hasn't made a single move to retaliate beyond what was necessary to defend himself. Evans realizes, in that moment, just how deep his prejudice had run, how much it had clouded his judgment. For the first time, the humiliation he feels is not about his loss of control but rather about his own actions, the blatant misuse of power and the assumptions he had carried without question. He clears his throat, the words struggling to come out. "Look," he begins, his voice quieter, almost uncertain. I crossed a line." Jaden rises slowly, his eyes never leaving Evans. The crowd quiets down, sensing the shift in tone. Evans looks around at the people who've watched the whole scene unfold, feeling their judgment but also, perhaps, their hope for something better. He takes a deep breath, forcing himself to confront the truth he's tried to deny. "I'll admit it," he says, his voice strained but honest. I've let my assumptions guide me. I've been quick to judge, especially people like you." He gestures toward Jaden, his expression filled with remorse. I let my own prejudices make me see things that weren't there. It's no excuse, and I'm sorry. Jaden holds his gaze, his expression softening slightly. The apology is unexpected, and though it doesn't erase the encounter, it's a step in the right direction. Jaden nods slowly, acknowledging the officer's admission. Evans swallows hard, feeling the weight of his actions. I've been wrong. About you, and probably about a lot of others, too. I can't take back what I've done, but I'll make sure to face it. To do better. The crowd is silent, absorbing the officer's words. Jaden, recognizing the gravity of the moment, extends a hand toward Evans. It's a gesture of both strength and forgiveness, a quiet acknowledgement that change is possible, even if the journey is long. Evans takes his hand, his grip firm but humble. The crowd slowly disperses, some nodding in approval, others still processing the unexpected outcome. In that early morning light, Evans feels something shift within him, a realization that the uniform he wears demands more than authority. It demands humility, respect, and accountability. As Jaden walks away, Evans watches him go, feeling the weight of his responsibility anew. This encounter, as bruising as it was, becomes the beginning of a transformation. And as the sun rises higher, casting a new light over the park, Officer Evans realizes he's been given a chance to do better, not just for the community, but for himself.